couple of their leaders have gone to Lebanon and stood on the Lebanese border and said, we're coming after you. But they've all been very carefully modulated to say that we will only go in if Israel escalates.
Yeah.
So they just haven't quite defined what that escalation means.
Let's get the latest on that war in the Middle East. A new convoy of aid for Gaza, but also an intensified campaign of airstrikes as well. Richard Spencer is in Israel for The Times, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Morning.
Good morning.
What have we seen in terms of this threat from Israel that they're going to intensify their campaign?
Well, to a certain extent, the thing we're seeing is the dog that doesn't bark. We've been expecting this ground incursion now, but since the start. It was always clear right from the start of this that there was going to be a ground invasion. The statement that they're going to go in and root out Hamas and its leaders physically, eradicate the group from Gaza would require boots on the ground, as they used to say. And we haven't seen that yet. We were expecting it by now, but we don't quite sure what the delay is for. We have some speculation in the paper talking to informed sources today. But yes, the two issues really are, well, there's the humanitarian issue in Gaza, which of course is first on a lot of people's minds, particularly of course if you're in Gaza. But in terms of the strategy and the war events going forward, the two issues are when this ground invasion will take place and how it will take place. And the second issue is, will then other enemies of Israel join in, like Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Also, there's the question of the Israeli hostages in Gaza as well. If the US is pressing Israel to delay the ground invasion of Gaza to allow more time to negotiate, do you think that's a large factor in what's happening or not happening?
It's a good question. Clearly, Israel has to take those demands seriously, and it has said that, various ministers have come and said the hostages are our first priority. Yet what Netanyahu fears is, it's pretty easy to see what Hamas could do here. They could release two hostages like they released on Friday night, those two hostages. They could release two hostages every few days, and they've got 200 of them. So they could just gradually, put this whole thing off until the whole momentum for Netanyahu's plans, withers away and dies. So I suspect Netanyahu is saying, yes, I'm listening to you, and of course I want to get the hostages out, but he won't be swayed too much.
Well, what do we know about the situation in Gaza? We've had that news overnight that 14 trucks of aid have now arrived in Gaza. A small glimmer of hope, the UN says, but that's clearly not enough, is it?
No, small is the operative word there. Normally, you'd have, the equivalent of hundreds of those trucks going in every day to supply that very small enclave with 2 million people living in it with food and particularly fuel for electricity, for its generators, for its power station to run its homes, hospitals, schools, and whatever. And that is that's a very strong need that they're not going to get at the moment.
And just finally, Richard, we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but you mentioned about some concerns about if Israel does push in with a ground invasion into Gaza, there's worries about what that might mean for Hezbollah in Lebanon coming and opening the war upon another front. How much of a concern is there that this whole situation could spin out of control and draw in more state and non-state actors?
Well, the Iranian foreign minister made that threat again yesterday at a press conference in Tehran. He said that the region is spinning out of control. We've seen quite a lot of heavy activity on the Lebanon border, with Hezbollah firing rockets at nearby Israeli positions, Israel going back in with strikes and killing a number of Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon. That threat is very real. I spoke to someone very well connected in Iran yesterday who's very, he's a kind of unofficial advisor to the regime, I think you might call him, and he didn't answer my question directly, really, about Iran getting involved. He said that he thought that Hamas would be able to fight Israel off in Gaza, which was an interesting statement. Not many people outside Iran, I suspect, would agree with him. But it was interesting that he didn't sort of say that was, that all of Iran was, on its on its front foot, ready to go in. He did say, of course, that Iran is always prepared to support allies to take on Israel. So I don't know, make of that what you will. There was a slight ambiguity I felt there, and certainly the posture of all these militias, not just Hezbollah, but there's a whole bunch of other Shia militias, particularly from Iraq, who are making warlike noises. A couple of their leaders have gone to Lebanon and stood on the Lebanese border and said, we're coming after you. But they've all been very carefully modulated to say that we will only go in if Israel escalates. Yeah. So they just haven't quite defined what that escalation means.
Yes, good point. Richard, thank you for that. Richard Spencer in Israel for The Times, speaking to us live from Tel Aviv.